Hi, this is Lisa Kelly, Notre Dame author and class of 1993, and you are watching the Two Irish Brothers show. Cheers and go Irish!
How's it going, everyone? I'm MD Sean 45.
I'm Irish Benjamin 57.
And together we make up the Two Irish Brothers. Now, Ben, the latest news in all of college football, even though we're a couple days late to talking about it, it has pretty much become official. The Oklahoma Sooners and the Texas Longhorns are going to be leaving the Big 12 for the SEC Conference. And from what it sounds like, the latest that this could actually start to happen is in 2025 after the grant of rights or whatever it's called in the Big 12 conference expires. But you just know that those lawyers for Texas and Oklahoma, they're working to get it done a lot sooner. So who knows? This could very well be the last year we see Texas and Oklahoma in the Big 12, and it could also be the last year that we see the Big 12 in general.
Yeah, I don't know if the whole conference will fold like people are saying. I think they will. I mean, they'll definitely lose Texas and Oklahoma. Obviously, those teams, mindsets and hearts are set on the fact that they want to go to the SEC. But I think that they'll add at least two more teams in place of Texas and Oklahoma, and they'll continue to be the quote-unquote Big 12. Now, do they lose their Power 5 label and then become a group of 6, I guess, would be the correct term, and then there would be a Power 4? I don't know. That would probably be more up for the NCAA to decide, but I like I said, I don't think that the whole conference will fold in and of itself, because there's a lot more at stake than just the football aspect. I mean, everybody's focusing on the football because that's where, Oklahoma and Texas really make their money. Mm-hmm. But the Big 12 is a very, very good baseball conference. The Big 12 is a very, very good softball conference. And the Big 12 is a really good basketball conference right now.
Oh, yes.
So them losing Texas and Oklahoma hurts a lot in football, but not as much, pardon me, in the rest of the sports. Softball would probably be the only other sport that it really, really hurts, since the reigning national champion for softball is the University of Oklahoma. But basketball, I mean, they have Baylor, currently going, and Kansas, that are just, absolute monsters when it comes to basketball. Baseball, of course, most of those Texas schools are always in the thick of things with baseball because it's warm year-round, So I think that, we're focusing on the whole football aspect, but it's a lot deeper, and I think it's a lot less worrisome, if you will, by losing Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC.
Right. Well, of course, and the NCAA has some decisions to make as far as its Group of 5 and Power 5 designations go. But Ben, before we get to discussing this topic any further, let us take this moment to hear a word from our sponsor.
Somewhere, right now, there's a clean, crisp, ice cold, Beechwood aged Budweiser with your name on it.
Okay, I don't care what anybody says, 80s or not, that commercial definitely makes you want to reach for a nice cold one, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay,
one of my favorites, so going right up my alley.
All right, well, there you go. There you go. All right, now getting into more detail here with the discussion on this topic. So talking specifically about the Big 12 itself, this is a conference in the last 10 years that obviously, as we all know, has had a lot of realignment. I mean, you lost Colorado to the Pac-12. You lost Nebraska to the Big 10. Missouri and Texas A&M to the SEC. Now you're going to be losing your two blue bloods to the SEC as well pretty soon. Now, obviously, the only two options is either after this move happens, the Big 12 is either going to fold, which I don't know. I think most likely that'll be the case. The conference just ends up folding altogether, or like we were talking about before the little break there, the conference will try to pull some teams from other conferences, or I guess poach would be the more correct term. And I'm going to leave it to you with this one, Ben, because you came up with this proposal. So I'm going to bring this up real quick, and this is what you think the new Big 12 could look like if they decide to stay together. That is after Texas and Oklahoma leave.
Yeah, so I mean, we add 3 more Texas teams, obviously. University of Houston, Texas State, and then Southern Methodist University. And then, of course, we add another Oklahoma team that replaces the Sooners, which is the University of Tulsa. So, I mean, it's all kind of in the same general vicinity. You have Texas and then Oklahoma jumping back in and stuff. So, that's just what I think. I mean, I've seen a couple other places say, Houston and SMU. I think those are the big two that most people would think would fill that Texas and Oklahoma void. I think Texas State could be a wild card and of course to jump in, and then of course Tulsa. They could supplement that Oklahoma State rivalry with the University of Tulsa. That would make a little bit of more noise in that Oklahoma aspect. So yeah. It's all hypothetical. I mean, we don't have any inside intel. I have no inside intel. It's just my guess. But just going with teams that have had fairly decent success. I mean, University of Houston beat Oklahoma just a few years ago. So, they're definitely a team that can hold their own in the Big 12. Texas State might be a little shaky if they were actually to get in, and Tulsa depending on the year. But SMU would be able to hold their own, I think, too. So, and we could see West Virginia leave. I mean, West Virginia could go join the ACC.
Yeah, we'll talk about where they could go here in a second. But I think
that's what I think. And that's what I would hope for. You grab some teams that are on that verge of being really good. And a step below, I guess, like the Oklahoma, Alabama, Ohio States of the world, and being one step down from them, but could still make some noise, like we saw with like Coastal Carolina last year and University of Louisiana. But yeah, I mean, it just makes sense. I mean, we could see it be an all Texas conference. I mean, you never know. I mean, maybe other teams dip and we add all Texas teams. I don't know. Then they call it the Texas Conference.
That'd definitely be interesting for sure.
But, I mean, we'll see. I don't know.
But all I know is if the Big 12 were to somehow stay together after this, that is definitely an interesting setup you have with the certain teams you had listed there, or that you had put together for your vision of the new Big 12. But something else too to think about is, if that's the route that the Big 12 conference does go and they want to try to stay together, this would be, and you and I talked about this a couple days ago, this could be the opportunity for a team like, say, North Dakota State to try and finally make its way to the FBS level.
Yeah. And it's funny that you actually say that, because they just announced in their camp, North Dakota State said, we're ready to jump whenever you guys want us. So, that really, really opens the door for some other stuff. And it would be exciting to see North Dakota State, because you got to remember, North Dakota State is currently on, don't quote me, I do believe it's like a 5-game winning streak against
FBS
What's
opponents.
the word I'm looking for? FBS teams.
Yeah.
So I mean, they and they had an opportunity this past season to play, but then they ended up closing down shop because of COVID.
Who are they going to play? Who are
they
they going to
play?
this?
Oregon, I do believe.
That would have been an interesting matchup.
I think it was Oregon. I think it was a big name team. It was a team from a Power 5 conference. Or was it Penn State? I don't know. I'd have to go look. But yeah, they were going to play someone big, and I pegged them to win. I said, before all this COVID stuff shut everything down, I was like, you watch out for North Dakota State. They'll come and get you. So
yeah.
But one of the other things that really, really kind of aggravates me is the fact that everybody is saying, well, who would be able to fill that void that Texas and Oklahoma's leaving? And, I feel like a lot of people forget about TCU in the Big 12 because since coming over from the Mountain West, TCU has made a lot of noise in the Big 12 conference.
Yeah.
I mean, they've had multiple Big 12 championship appearances, of course, losing them to Oklahoma, but, Oklahoma's a blue blood. On the other hand, though, the last 10 times that TCU and Texas have met, Texas only has 3 wins. So TCU's 7-3 against Texas.
Yeah, they've been able to take care of business.
So when you're saying who could fill that void, I think TCU could really, really fill that void.
Yeah, they could jump. They could jump in and be that blue blood.
I get that people say, "Well, look at how much they generate. Texas generates billions of dollars," and I understand that. But I'm saying, like, when it comes to competition level in the Big 12, TCU would have no problem sliding on in and being that quote unquote bully that everybody pegs Texas to be. And I feel like the two bullies right now in the Big 12 is Oklahoma and TCU, not Texas. So
I mean, Texas has come along nicely, but we forget they had a pretty rough stretch there for several years.
Yes.
But they're still though they're Texas. I mean,
that loss to Alabama in the national title kind of knocked them down a couple rungs. Let's just say that when Colt McCoy was their quarterback.
Right.
So,
that's true.
There weren't too many good years after Colt left, and they're trying to rebound. So, I mean, we'll see. Steve Sarkisian's now the head coach. I think it's a great pickup for Texas. Texas is a recruiting hotbed for players. So if Sarkisian can take full advantage, Texas could be on their way back. But you got to wait and see.
Well, I mean, of course, in the grand scheme of things, this move for Oklahoma and Texas, it is all about revenue. I mean, the overall conference revenue, and I could be wrong about the exact number, but I think it was like the SEC made like $30 or $40 million more than what the Big 12 did last year in revenue as a conference. So, I mean, yeah, it sucks for, changing things the way we, the fans, are used to seeing it. But from a business perspective, you get why they're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, this is very football driven, and it's when you're recruiting at Texas and Oklahoma, it's the classic, well, if you come and play at Oklahoma or you come and play at Texas, guess who you get to play? You get to play Alabama. You get to play LSU. You get to play Florida. You get to play Georgia. You get to be on the big stage. And that's what Notre Dame uses. Oh, well, you get to play USC. You get to be on national TV every week. You get to, so that's what they're doing,
Yeah. And with Texas and with Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC, I heard a fellow YouTuber, Oni Kuno. He's an Oklahoma fan who's been doing videos for years now. I caught a few of his videos, and I've actually quite enjoyed him and what he's had to say about the topic at hand with this. And apparently, the SEC is going to be going to a pod format when it becomes 16 teams with the Longhorns and the Sooners. So you're going to have 4. Basically, it's going to be a 4 division conference. And I'm not going to break it all down, but basically what's going to happen is you're going to play the 3 teams in your pod, and then 2 teams from the 3 remaining pods. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 conference games plus your 3 out of conference.
Yeah.
So I can't lie and say that I'm not excited to see about how that could work. So, I mean, so even though this sucks that we're seeing, some traditions kind of die here, so to speak, for lack of a better term, it is cool to see the new kind of stuff that this realignment is going to come up with in the SEC.
Oh yeah, I mean it'll definitely create new rivalries, and bring back some old rivalries. People forget Texas and Arkansas have met like 70 times or something like that. I mean that's
the old
incredible.
Southwest.
I mean that's incredible. You open the door for Texas and LSU. I mean people forget that LSU and Texas border each other. So I mean that'd be a lot of fun, huh?
Texas and Alabama, Oklahoma and Alabama, Georgia and Texas.
I mean, people forget that Oklahoma and Florida kind of have a rivalry going even before this move.
Yeah.
Bradford and Tebow met in the national title, and Florida got them. And then Oklahoma played Florida last year in a bowl game, and Oklahoma got them. So it's been back and forth. So, it's going to get a little more exciting, I think. And yeah, we can be a little upset with, oh, you're breaking tradition. And, I was there. You're breaking the Bedlam game between Oklahoma State and Oklahoma. And I hope they don't. I hope that they find a way to continue it, kind of like Clemson and South Carolina did when South Carolina moved to the SEC. They kept the Battle of the Palmetto State going. And then the same with Georgia and Georgia Tech. Georgia and Georgia Tech are two teams that are not in the same conference, and they play against each other every year. So hopefully Oklahoma and Oklahoma State keep that going.
Yeah, I hope so too. I hope they do find a way. And so yeah. With that said, I mean, as much as things suck, there's a lot of exciting things to look forward to as well. I mean, you do have to take the good with the bad. But that's just the life of college football for you. Things aren't always going to stay the same, especially in this day and age. And as we all know, obviously, geography don't mean crap here.
Well, geography went out the door a few years ago when conference realignments and stuff started going.
Well, and speaking of that, let's get back to that. But let's talk about the other side of the card here, the other side of the coin. So let's say that the Big 12 does what, in my opinion, I think most likely is going to happen, whether it's 5 years from now, a year from now, whatever. Let's say the Big 12 does disband completely. So that the 8 remaining teams, and I'll bring it up just so we can work with it here. And from when I was watching Oni Kuno's video, I liked where I liked his ideas of where the remaining 8 teams could go. And it makes sense too, because I could see, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, and TCU possibly going to the Pac-12 and become the Pac-15, whatever. West Virginia, as you said earlier, Ben, they likely make the move to the ACC from rumors that we heard from our pal Golden Blue dude. It sounds like they are going to the ACC. And then the Kansas and Iowa State likely to the Big Ten. And then the remaining teams, Baylor and let's see. Yeah. Baylor, I could easily see them heading to the American. So that's the thing in this. That's another part of this too, is if you want to try to keep the conference together, do you really think that the American Conference, which people might think I'm nuts for saying this, but they are kind of a growing conference. I mean, they've started to really play some pretty good football in recent years. Do you think that they're going to want to let the Big 12 poach some of their key members, like Houston, like Tulsa, like who was the other one he had listed on there? SMU. Are they going to want to let those teams go?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on, I don't know what their contract situation is and when teams could quote unquote leave, to somewhere else and all that. But yeah, I mean, that you bring up a good point. What do they have to say about all of that?
Yeah.
I mean, so Yeah,
Well,
it's all crazy. I mean, if we're talking about, major realignment in college football, I mean, we could see Cincinnati go to the Big Ten. I mean,
yeah.
they're another American team. I mean, so I mean, maybe the small conferences are going to be no more. I don't know.
Well,
So
I don't know if I'd go that far, because you can't have a 16-team conference in every conference. I mean, it's just, well, maybe you can, but I don't know. It just wouldn't be feasible, in my opinion.
Yeah,
But
I don't know.
What I also think could be really interesting, and this seems maybe is a long shot, but what if those 8 remaining teams in the Big 12 maybe join forces with the American and form a super conference with them? Because as I was saying, the American is kind of growing a little bit, playing some better football. You could bring several of those, either some of those members, those remaining members, or all of them, and you could really get some strength to that conference.
Yeah, I mean, you could, you bring up a good point. I mean, you could make it. I mean, it's currently an 11-member conference. So, if you add 8, that would be 19. So that would be a 19-team conference.
Well, in that case, they're probably not going to go that far. It probably wouldn't happen.
It could happen, though, Sean. I mean,
yeah, I guess.
But
I just think 16.
The future is very cloudy. We just don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I just almost wonder if after thinking about it, if 19, 20 teams wouldn't be stretching it for a conference.
Yeah. And another wild card that I would say that I will talk about that I've seen kind of thrown around would be Brigham Young to the Big 12. Now, I've seen Brigham Young to the Big 12, and I've seen Colorado to the Big 12. I don't think Colorado comes back. I mean, they left for a reason. They found a good place in the Pac-12. I mean, the Pac-12 is as geographically sound as you can be as a conference. So I mean, and I guess the Big Ten too. I mean, even though Maryland kind of stretches out a little bit, and so does Rutgers. I mean, they still touch the rest of the. I think Nebraska would really be the only one that's kind of out there. But anyway, back to the Colorado and Brigham Young situation. I don't think either one of them really join. I mean, Brigham Young is an independent, and if anything, Brigham Young really showed why they loved being independent last year with COVID, doing what they did, and going on a very, very good run. I mean, Brigham Young was a phenomenal football team last year. So I don't know. I mean, I could see Brigham Young going to the Big 12 before I could see Colorado coming back to the Big 12.
Boise State could be another candidate too to fill one of those. Those voids.
I mean, and if we're going to do super conferences, then I would think Boise State would join the Pac-12 and make it a 16-team conference. You know? I mean, that's what I would see happening. Because I mean, then once again, you're on the same time zone geographically. You're more sound. The Pac-12 could add Colorado State, and to add another team, they could add Wyoming. You would keep some rivalries going. You would actually make the rivalries better because it would be easier for those teams to schedule, with Colorado versus Colorado State, Wyoming versus Colorado, and Wyoming versus Colorado State.
Yeah.
And then you get Boise State in there. I could see something like that. So you just don't know. It's all hypothetical. We're all having fun with it.
Yeah. And speaking of having fun with it, I'm going to bring this back up. And I know you said you gave your thoughts on West Virginia, but Ben, where could you see the remaining teams going, in your opinion, if the Big 12 does disband?
Totally breaks apart. Let's just say hypothetically that the Big 12 does disintegrate. Collapses.
I gave you my thoughts. Where do you think the remaining teams would go?
So I would definitely probably see Iowa State going to the Big 10. Making that rivalry, continuing that rivalry with Iowa. They've always made it work, even though they're in two different conferences. Probably Kansas State and Kansas would definitely join either Conference USA or the American. West Virginia would definitely go to the ACC, in my opinion, And then Oklahoma State and TCU and Texas Tech would have to figure some stuff out. I think it would be either the American or Conference USA.
And what about Baylor?
And then Baylor. Oh, I forgot all about Baylor. And then Baylor, I don't know. I mean, probably same situation, American or Conference USA. I don't know. It's crazy. It's crazy to think, what's going on. I don't know.
Well,
I mean, maybe, in a crazy world, maybe a new conference comes up and Nebraska leaves the Big Ten where they've struggled. Everybody thought Nebraska would be the next bully, and Nebraska really hasn't done what everybody thought they would do in the Big Ten. So maybe Nebraska, Iowa State, Kansas State, all go, okay, well, we're going to make our own conference. I mean,
that's way out there, but I like it.
I don't know. I mean, like I said, it's all hypothetical, but I mean, if I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of blocks fall with the Texas and Oklahoma moving to the SEC, where teams end up, what new things might happen. But the good part for most of this is it sounds like none of this is really going to affect Notre Dame too much.
Oh, well, I mean, currently Notre Dame's an independent. So, I mean, and everybody that Notre Dame has scheduled that are like marquee matchups, like big name matchups that Notre Dame has scheduled are all solid members of conferences. We have Ohio State on the horizon. We have Alabama on the horizon. We have Florida on the horizon. Who's the other one I'm blanking on?
Texas A&M.
Texas A&M. I mean, these are all teams that have solid membership in conferences, so you wouldn't have to worry too much.
Yeah.
And then of course the originals, Southern Cal, Michigan, if they could, if we get them back on the schedule, Michigan State. These are all teams. Florida State, Clemson. These are all guys that are solid where they are at. So
yeah, and
it's not like you're playing in Oklahoma State, a West Virginia type that could be on the move.
And that's my point. It's nothing really affects us as far as like scheduling teams and the need to join a conference and any of that stuff. I mean,
well, I mean, the good thing with being an independent is there is that flexibility. It's,
yes.
Oh, okay, well, we lost you guys. Oh, that's a bummer, but we can go schedule somebody else. I mean, Brigham Young proved it, last year.
Yeah.
Notre Dame got a conference, and I think that was the ACC's way of wooing, and trying to get Notre Dame to join full time. But then Brigham Young went the opposite direction and was like, we don't need no conference. We'll schedule guys. We'll figure it out. And they did,
Yeah.
So I think that's what would happen with Notre Dame. Notre Dame would be like, oh, we lost you. That stinks. Well, moving on, and then,
Yeah.
like,
well, all I know is, Ben, overall in this situation with the Longhorns and the Sooners, it sucks, but at the same time, there's a lot of things to be excited about too, and to see what exactly happens with the landscape of college football. So it'll be an interesting next few years here coming up here to see what exactly happens.
Yeah. Well, and then the final thing that I think a lot of people are kind of forgetting about is they wanted to expand the playoffs. So what does this current realignment that we're going to see Texas and Oklahoma move. I mean, that's obvious. We're going to see them move. So let's just say that they move, everything stays the same. Big 12 becomes the Big 8, whatever, and then everybody stays where they're at. Okay. How does that affect the college football playoff expansion?
That's true.
So, I mean, what happens with the Big 12? Do they stay a Power 5 conference, or do they drop down to a
group of 6?
A group of 6, I don't know.
Yeah, it's all up to the NCAA on that point.
So it's all interesting,
Oh yeah,
and
it
I
is.
think we're all kind of anxiously awaiting what's going to happen.
Oh yeah. So, well, on that note, Ben, I think we covered all the basics with this one. Definitely a lot of twists and turns that this route could take with the Big 12, whether it stays, whether it goes, where teams go, possibly. Who knows? But it's going to be fun to watch. So on that note, I think we covered all we had to. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yes. One last thing.
Sure.
Okay. Today is one of the greatest running backs to ever play's birthday. Sweetness, Walter Payton's birthday is today. That's why I'm wearing a Bears hat today. So I just wanted to give a pretty big shout out to the Payton family, and happy birthday, Walter Payton.
Yes. Happy birthday. Yep. Happy birthday in heaven, Sweetness. We all still miss you.
So yep. So that's all I got.
I didn't even realize that. I'm glad you brought that up. So, all right, Ben. Well, as always, this was another great episode. I hope you guys watched and enjoyed it. And on that note, I'm ND Sean 45.
I am Irish Benjamin 57.
And as always, God bless, good night, and go Irish.
Go Irish.